Europa will wieder mal eine
Europe wants to take over a leadership position in the world again. This time the topic is artificial intelligence. Trustworthy artificial intelligence, to be precise. Welcome from the permanent representation of the state of Hessen in Brussels to a discussion about artificial intelligence. Ladies and gentlemen, from wherever you're watching, thank you for finding the time to taking part virtually. We will be discussing the opportunities that arise with artificial intelligence. We will discuss how proper regulation can be set up by the European Union. The Commission has presented a proposal in spring, but progress hasn't been as fast as some may have hoped. We will be, of course, interviewing our experts from science and politics on this topic. But before we start our debate, I'm going to pass the floor to the Minister for European Affairs in Wiesbaden, Lucia Puttrich. Ladies and gentlemen, the development of artificial intelligence could be the best or the worst thing to ever happen to humankind. Famous quote by Stephen Hawking. This, of course, means that this adequately describes the challenge we're facing. We have to do things right in order to increase the potential of artificial intelligence. The importance of artificial intelligence is shown at the Conference for the Future of Europe. Digital links have been an important topic, and we've received a lot of comments through this system. People are worried, there are concerns, there are worries about dehumanization and total surveillance that are quite frequently addressed. These fears show the particular challenges of artificial intelligence. It's a complicated technological topic that has an undeniable potential for the future. It's a technology for the future, but it is linked to some reservations and concerns. It is our task to set up proper framework conditions for artificial intelligence. We, of course, have to involve citizens in this. That is our position in Hessen. Already in 2016, we've presented our digital strategy. And this digital strategy has been continued. This year, there's a clear core focus, and that core focus is humanity. We want to show how we handle AI in media and AI in general in Hessen. We will have Kristina Sinemus as one of our panelists for this. And this is the feedback from this work in Hessen is something I will bring into the work in the future of on the Conference on the Future of Europe, where I work in the working group on digital change. We're all looking into questions of digitization, and AI is only one of several topics. Currently, the core topic is the regulation of big internet companies. There's also the proposal for a European identity in this level. There's a lot of innovative power in digitization, and for the future I can imagine that digitization will also be more used for democratic processes. We should be courageous and passionate in our way of digital change, of the digital revolution, which is why I'm so happy that we will be tackling this topic once more today. I wish you all an interesting discussion with new insights that will certainly be an enrichment also for the legislative procedure on the European level. The best or the worst to ever happen to humanity. That's a very good description of the stakes of what we're talking about. If you're sitting in your office or at home, if you have questions for our experts in our panel, then you can ask those questions online on the streamline at lv-brussels.hessen.de, or you can call us under the number +32 472 030181. And the opportunities of artificial intelligence are enormous. A study has been published today by the Brussels-based think tank Bruegel, quotes estimations that economic performance may increase up to 20% until 2030 if companies harness in a widespread fashion, AI in a widespread fashion. But of course, this is all linked to a if, and this doesn't include any of the potential risks. I will now pass the floor to the Hessian Digital Minister, Kristina Sinemus. Okay, so let's get started with the debate. Then we appear to have a technical problem, so we might have her contribution a little later during the event. Some of my panelists are already standing ready. As you can see, we cannot have a live panel debate on the same stage due to the corona limitations, which is why this will be a digital panel. But this is, of course, very appropriate to today's topics, and I'm looking forward to my guests. Live from the European Parliament, not far from here, Axel Voss. Or are you at home? I can't even tell. You might be at home, but Axel Voss, for all of you who may not know him, is the rapporteur for AI in the special committee in the European Parliament, with the special committee named AIDA, and was founded particularly for artificial intelligence. But you're not only in the special committee, but also in your work in the committee for the internal market. A warm welcome to Mr. Voss. From the European Commission, I would like to welcome Irina Orssich, Head of Sector for AI Policy from DG Connect. A warm welcome to you as well. And from Berlin, we have the Director of the Department for Digitalization and Innovation of the Federal Association for German Industry, Thomas Koenen, my apologies. And in Hessen, we have two speakers for the initiative, hessian.AI. Professor Mira Mezini and Professor Kristian Kersting. A warm welcome to the two of you as well. I can also see that the Minister has managed to join us. So I've used the new tools. This would not have been, which didn't work, but it didn't quite work as intended. So we had to find alternatives, as is always the case, or often the case in digitization. And I'm happy to be with you now. Well, so we have already done our introduction, but this might be the perfect time for your opening statement. Of course, gladly, I'll welcome all of you from the Digital Ministry of Hessen. And I'm going to present quite visually our digital strategy for Digital Hessen. Within this strategy, we have, of course, paid a lot of attention to the topic of AI. This is really a core topic in the strategy because regulation of AI is extremely important to us, because we want to treat the topic of artificial intelligence, to give shape to artificial intelligence in a way that combines innovation and responsibility. This means enabling the future, supporting innovation, but this in a responsible way. Now, how do we do that? We have set up hessian.AI. I'm very happy to see Kristian, Kersting, and Mira Mezini, who are two great speakers of hessian.AI and are great scientists as well, who have a very keen eye for the application and orientation of an AI and who is supposed to use AI. This is one of the core elements of our AI strategy, which is people, citizens of Europe who should be able to use AI in such a way that it makes their day-to-day life easier. Utility in day-to-day life should be the core approach. Europe doesn't have to hide its efforts. We have to look at the regulations. Regulations are important, but the framework has to be set up in such a way that I do not block out startups and PME and SMEs. And I don't want to limit citizens either. We want to set it up in such a way that using AI, research activities and innovations can be implemented in such a way that it is done responsibly, which is why we set up hessian.AI in Hessen. And of course, the Digital Ministry is very proud of that project. There's one that is, for example, is called RoboTrust. How can I trust in robots. How can I create responsibility here? And I think it's our responsibility as politicians, as researchers, as parts of European society, that we have to be willing to fight for regulation of AI. And I know that Axel Voss is a great expert, and I've been able to go to AIDA with him, and I think it will be very, very interesting to observe discussions that will happen within AIDA, because this is, of course, also very closely linked to AI. 5 core topics are very close to our hearts in our digital strategy in Hessen. First of all, AI innovation. We want to promote AI innovation with our own program, VDE, by setting up a foundation and testing hub. Secondly, we want AI research and AI teaching, which is something that Kristian, Kersting and Mira Mezini will certainly say more about. An interdisciplinary approach is very important in this field. Thirdly, we want to generate interest for AI amongst citizens, and we want to strengthen the level of AI skills and competences amongst citizens, and also for specialized workers in the industry. Fourth, we want to develop AI for administration. Just yesterday, there has been an approach of investing a certain sum into AI, into using AI checkpoints, for instance. And the fifth point I want to address in this is that calculation infrastructure can be developed in a sustainable way here in Hessen. These are our 5 agenda items in the way that we want to give shape to the future. This is the future for AI in Hessen. AI made in Hessen is supposed to be the way to the future. I hope we can discuss this on the European level. And the next step in Europe is that we take responsibility for the integral element of AI research and application. We need that kind of regulation. That is our guideline for digital policy in Hessen as well. And I'm looking forward for the very interesting contributions from the panel of experts, for example, from Mr. Voss and Ida, Kristian, Kersting and Mira Mezini. Will certainly share some of the experience of research and application, and Mr. Koenen from BDI will certainly have a strong position based on the community. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank. Ja, Innovation und Verantwortung.
Yes, innovation and responsibility. How can we put these 2 topics together in our discussion? And you were trying to bring all these together in order not to hinder innovation, and to say that Europe has a USP, probably an advantage if we find a regulation that give us some limits in order to be ethical in the future. Could you please just tell us with what thoughts you started before you have your document in April? Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm happy to speak here. And we already talked about it, innovation and responsibility. We have to enhance responsibility and also be successful in order to be reliable. This is a very important point, and therefore our rules are rules for the single market, for the safe products on the market, and this means that they are already valuable when we have AI on the European market. It's just like the acceptance, not for every single user, but for example, for your car. Before we have this AI on the market, we should have a look if all this is adapted and to the rules, and this with standards. This means this should be very easy. what we want to protect is the security, but also the basic rights. And we have also the rule that we have the will to protect this, and we don't want to rule every AI in the sense of innovation. 80 to 85% of all the systems would not be touched by this ruling, but only systems that are at high risk, and 85 no ruling, or maybe only some short rulings, and then we have some systems where we need certain transparency, and we have some things that are not allowed, and we have the high risk systems that before they are put on the market have to fit in these requests. The regulation should be a horizontal one. We do not want any exceptions at a sectoral level, and we want also a complementary adaptation with already existing rules like data protection, and we do not want to overrule it, but we want to insert ourselves in this puzzle and to have a simple rule. And then the last point, we already have in the proposals in which we want to enhance innovation, but obviously also a concentration on small enterprises, where we should see how we can maybe reduce what they pay. All this is going hand in hand, and this is obviously with a coordinated plan that has been adopted on the same day in April, where we see that the member states, the regions, are working together in strategies like Hessen does have it, with different facilities for tests, digital innovation hubs, and so on. And this is an ecosystem for artificial intelligence in Europe, and this together with the proposal that should be brought ahead. Well, in 2 points, I would like to say something. 80 to 85% will not be touched by this ruling. Could you foresee how many of the others will be in the different categories? And you have 4 in total. Do you have any idea how this will be distributed? We also have a total refusal, and maybe we can also see it a little bit like for cars. So who will be deciding upon all that? Well, the first question, how many, we do not know right now, but we do know that the 85% do not have any risk. This means that are deliberate measures. It's where we have the rule of transparency, we have chatbots, or when a person is exposed to AI, where we have the chatbots, this is something that will be quite often there, but it's only about to say, hey, you are on AI, then those that are not allowed, there's very few, because we only have 4 categories, and this is really the high point of our pyramid. And inside this 15%, probably 10%, but they are in the high risk category. Apart, you want to count every chatbot. And who is deciding? Yeah, that was the second question, right? The conformity check will be there. This is then the high risk AI, and also not for those who are forbidden, but for the high risk we have the conformity check, and for this we have for the AI that is part of components of already regulated systems, like in a car, in a machine, where we already have a regulation with a conformity check. In this, the AI elements are part of the conformity check, and we will also have a check with a special office, but this is somebody who is already doing it right now. And then we have the autonomous AI, where we still don't have a check like this. There we will have a check for those who are bringing this thing on the market. And there is an exception where we want also a third check, and we will also have other organizations on the market who will check if really everything is in order. It will be a decentralized implementation, and in Brussels as an AI board, the commission as a secretariat, in order to make all that coherent, but a decentralized application. Mr. Koen, can you arrive to what you wanted to have innovation? Thank you very much for the invitation for BDI and me. It's a very important topic, and it is also important to see it on the European and on the regional level. This is very often not the case in Berlin, and therefore I welcome you all from our team in Berlin. Just one or two comments in order to pep it up. And I would like to cite Montesquieu. When we do not need regulation, then it's the need that we shouldn't have this regulation. And this is just a point I would like to insert here. We see actually AI that is used, and many people think that AI, they think about strange realities, but we should see the risks that are foreseen for the future AI, and we have to divide this. We have to be very clear-minded, and AI is very important for the German industry, and we have a lot of these industries that are so-called key industries, blockchain, edge computing, and so on. From our part, AI is of central importance, and we already have these AI systems in the industrial application. Why, therefore, the sharp quote I made? I think we do need a regulation for AI, because the application on persons, this can have very negative effects, and therefore we are in favor of such a regulation of AI. But as you said, where innovation is not blocked, but where we are working in a very sensible manner, that there where we still do not have high risks or catastrophes, a system that gives us the opportunity to use it, but catastrophes or other things that are related to the human being will be avoided. AI is already used. I see it in the quality management. This is often cited example. We have AI in many companies, and optimizing the processes, because the companies have immediately a return on investment, and the blocking times are reduced, and all the procedures are optimized. Therefore, many applications that are already important in our work, and I have to say it because we are in an international market, and we have to be prepared so as well as we can, and therefore AI is a very important instrument. And I think that not only politics should do homework, but also the companies. This is related to both of them. And first of all, we have to prepare data, because AI without data is like having a hammer without a nail. Then AI is not bringing a lot, and when we have the data and we try to animate them, those who are not there yet, and Mr. Voss, this is another debate. If we can delimitate them with the people, then this might be a difficult topic, but then where the politic wants something interesting on the European level, then we have a good framework. We have the KI applications, and we should avoid that, and we should do everything that we have high risk applying to high risk, and we see the big problem. It's not that we have an AI regulation, we back this, but we are talking about the risks. This is exactly the right thing. We have all this in different protection levels. We already know this, and when we see what is part in this high risk sector, then we have the impression that there are still too many appliances or things that are not really clarified. So to exclude that, you might just fall into it, and therefore an application for those sectors that are important for many people, and then also the basic protection. All this is important, and this should be there in any case, but the industry, we hear this from the companies, differentiate approach with data from the machines that should not enter in this part. And we have heard already about an excellent idea. I think it's very important in this context, and this is all I wanted to say, just to make a start.
Das war jetzt ein klares Ja.
So that was a clear yes, but how do scientists steer proposals from Brussels? Maybe you could already touch upon the thoughts that and concerns that are expressed by the economic part. Well, first of all, I would like to thank you as well for giving us the possibility to express the thoughts of science, to be the voice of science, and not only look into technical aspects and research, but that this clearly shows how well we cooperate between the economic aspects and the scientific aspects in Hessen. Now, getting back to the topic. In our research, in our basic research at hessian.AI, we've also looked into trustworthy, robust AI in service to people and European values. We want to implement this on a technical level, so we have a different approach. We have similar goals to the Commission, similar to the ones that they pursue with their proposal for regulation, but we want to handle this on a technical level. Because AI will be regulated by those who understand it on a technical level, who control it on a technical level. That's at least my personal opinion. And we, of course, are in favor of this initiative, but personally, I think it's a little bit too early for two main reasons. First of all, I see certain risks involved in this approach. I mean, the first risk that everybody has mentioned is that this might stifle or be a burden or slow down innovation, which would mean that we lag behind other parts of the world in that kind of development. So this it might be a little bit too early for this regulation, which would give other areas of the world a head start in that kind of research, and then we end up accepting AI that has not been developed on the basis of our values. And that's something that we can see, for example, if we look at platforms. Total surveillance has been mentioned, and this is something that is in practice already happening, and that's because we are lagging behind in technical development in certain aspects. Behind the US, for instance, the bigger platforms that are not European, but that are controlling data of European citizens, US companies handling European data, and we're trying to regulate this. There's a lot of work being put into this, and it's not easy. This is something that we should indeed avoid with AI by having a people-centric AI that we develop in Europe, the methods of the AI, a European style of AI, to really build it from the ground up in order to take the lead here. And the risk I see is that we currently have rather insufficient amount of AI application and research. We should have more, really. And if we get too much regulation too early in this process, this will lead to uncertainty, especially for SMEs in technical and even more particularly in the technical implementation of their projects. And therefore, as I said to start with, we are concentrating on the development of future AI. Because AI is progressing very quickly, and that's a clear sign that it's a little bit too early to regulate. There's so many changes happening. There's so much moving right now that it's very difficult to decide what type of AI we are even regulating right now. Research is happening on international level, but and intentionally we do this. But in Hessen, in particular, we are really focusing on third wave AI, as we call it, where the goal is to have AI by design, to set it up by design in such a way that it is ethical, that is unbiased, that it follows the rules. And this is something we do within an ecosystem. And one of the previous speakers has mentioned this briefly, that in Hessen, beyond Hessen.AI, where we do not only do high-level research, but we also have the task, the commitment to nourish and to set up and nourish an innovation ecosystem for science, industry, and society to cooperate in. And this is something that we do, that we want to do by putting a lot of effort into knowledge transfer, into promoting startups, and into cooperation. And test labs, shared test labs for AI, for instance, and by having innovation labs with very solid infrastructure and know-how are available for the industry. And of course, the topic of education. We are universities. All of the Hessian universities, all 13, are involved in Hessen.AI. There will be interdisciplinary studies, AI combined with one particular subject, in order that both fields can profit from this cooperation. And I think I should stop here before I go into too much detail. And I'm certain Kristian will have a lot of things to add. Well, I would be very interested as well if you share the concerns that regulation is happening at the wrong time, happening too early. Yes, in essence, I already said, well, yes, that's why I addressed the question to Mr. Kersting. Oh, apologies. Yes, regulation in itself is nothing bad. That is completely normal. We know that from the medical field as well. I don't expect anything bad. Regulation is fine. What I'm worried about, and where I share concerns that have been expressed, is that many actors have a wrong impression, a wrong image of AI. That AI is on an equivalent level of humans. We always talk about one AI, the AI. And in IT, we sometimes talk about the flying spaghetti monster, which would be such a weird creature that just exists, and that's not what it is. AI is a field of science. It's not more, it's not less. And if you have something, this is really a setup of algorithms that should represent intelligent behavior. And many colleagues say that can't be it, because I understand that. What I'm afraid of is that we push forward regulation because we have created a myth of AI by imagining something magical, something akin to black magic. And some of you have mentioned that AI could become ethical. And that sounds like AI is unethical, and I would say, no, that's not true, because what I do in my research already is ethical. What's important, and I can see this in Hessen, in Germany, in EU, I can see it in many places, is that we have to be willing to have a dialogue about this, because AI is a driving force that can push in several directions, or can be pulled in several directions, and nobody knows what this field will look like in 20 or 30 years, which is why we have to act now, which is why ecosystems and an exchange between the technical level, research, science, political level, and society is so important. And regulation should be kind of like a dance where you have to have this exchange between innovation and regulation. And if you ask my wife, I sometimes step on her feet when we're dancing, and then we have to correct our steps and take it again. And we all have to stay open to the possibility of mistakes and to changing our approach based on results. And that's something that is visible in the plan presented by the EU. So from the high-level vision, I completely agree. And you can see that the US are already beginning to follow a lead on this. And you have emphasized this, Mr. Koenen, as well. We have to make sure that the people who drive technology forward, who understand algorithm, are involved, can explain what AI actually is, and who have an understanding of what is possible and what is not possible. That is very important. We are well set up for this in Hessen, in Germany, and in Europe. People always talk about the US and about China because that's where the big companies are situated. But if you look at research, like what's really driving future developments, then Germany and Europe are very well positioned because we're driving AI research forward. We are a key central actor in this, and which is why we have to continue to move forward in order to get up this proper dance of regulation, as I've mentioned. And I think this is a good thing that I'm happy that you enjoy real labs, because that's something we want to really bring together, to have research and labs and tests, all of this together. And especially for Germany, we don't want to wait and have to buy our technology from elsewhere. No, we should develop this technology together according to European standards, the way we want to see it. And that, of course, with more support from the government if possible. I would be very happy about that. We all have to stay open-minded. We shouldn't follow this mythical image of AI. AI exists in order to serve people, and I'd rather talk about what AI is instead of talking about what AI isn't, and I spend a lot of time discussing that, regrettably. Well, that sounds like you've just found a dancing partner, respectively. I don't mind taking the lead, by the way. Mr. Voss, let's get to you. We've spoken about concerns that it might be a little bit early for the regulation, but on the other hand, in the European Parliament, you're a little bit stuck. It's not really making any progress. I mean, I've had someone here 4 weeks ago from your committee who said, well, until the end of the month, we will have found an agreement. Which committee is responsible for this, and there was a lot of infighting over who is actually responsible and competent, so you haven't really done anything on the content level yet, isn't that true? Well, thank you, Ms. Wettach, for the invitation, and I would indeed wish we were as goal-oriented, or we have the same energy as Kristina Sinemus in order to move these things forward on the European level. You are, of course, entirely right. End of April, there was the proposal has been published, and we still aren't able in the Parliament, and it has taken 7 months to decide which committee is responsible. That is just sad. And it seems like we're pretending that we have all the time in the world, which is clearly not the case. Quite to the contrary, I would even think that time is running out where we even will have the possibility to take a determining position, a leadership position in this. And sometimes I really get frustrated with the system and think about how it could be changed, revolutionized. And this as a member of a conservative party, which is a little bit atypical, where I would really rather have to have science and industry further removed from legislators simply because we cannot act quickly enough. We do not even have a higher level plan or concept for this. We are discussing individual critical points. This is something we can do. This is what we can bring forward, but we aren't able at the same time to say, how do we want to lead this as the European Union? How are we supposed to lead if all we're concentrating on is protecting something? We have to find the courage. We have to make the means available, the capital available. The infrastructure has to be set up properly. All of the framework conditions have to be set up, and we are not and we have to unite our strength in Europe, because individual states cannot lift this burden, and this is something that we have to move forward. And if politicians and legislators can't do this, I have to call for the courage of the economy, of the industry, and do it yourself independently of what's coming. Of course, this is linked with some risks that you might develop in a direction that the legislator might not like in the end, or might not like in that exact way. But I'm under the impression that we will not be able to manage it in a different way. This might take 2 or 3 years before this ends up being implemented in the member states, whatever is decided here. And I think that by that time, the window of opportunity will have been closed thoroughly. And this is something I've mentioned in the report for the AIDA committee, so the special committee for AI, for a digital Europe, or a digital age, rather. I really, really stressed this important aspect. There are some sectors that we want to look into, be it health, competition, democracy, security, climate change, etc. These are all things we're trying to showcase what possibilities exist in those fields, and many elements of this report are overshadowed by a roadmap for the European Union for the digital age. Something that goes beyond AI. And this shows that we really have to put in a lot more effort on the conceptual level, especially in changing our approach to these topics. And from my point of view, and I'm not sure if everybody else will agree with me, but I get the feeling that if you want to take a leadership role on a global level, you have to be leading in artificial intelligence. Otherwise, you will not be able to. That is quickly becoming necessary. We need companies that are way more active in that field, and that have the courage, in spite of our overemphasis on data protection, still dare to use the data that we have to prepare them. And if there is personal data involved, well, I will have to take that risk. And if I may add, for this exchange with the national parliaments, there are 2 topics that come up again and again, that are the 2 topics that are a little bit controversial. every member state, and in our particular case, every federal state, wants to set up their own activities because they see themselves with competitors as competitors with other states, and so they all want to do their own thing, but they all want a unified European framework in order to be able to compete with China or the US. So this is, of course, quite controversial. The second controversial topic is that everybody's talking about this, and that's simply the way politics is set up, that of course we want data protection, data safety. We want the protection of private life. We want to be protected from profiling. But on the other hand, we want algorithms that generate results that are usable, that are transparent, can be explained, sustainable, that they are GDPR compliant, non-discriminating, gender mainstreamed, and so on. And that for this, the idea of the Commission was a great idea to set up those real labs, because otherwise I don't think how we could get there with all the wishes politicians have, all the expectations they have for the algorithms. And there's just a discrepancy where we want nice results for AI on the one hand, but on the other hand, we are so slowed down by data protection questions, we're limiting our own options, that may lead to us not even getting any results, because if we cannot use high quality data, how do you expect us to get quality results? This is a discrepancy, and I'm of course, I may be exaggerating a bit, but we want to win digitization without using data. This will not work. And this is why we really have to change our approach, have to put in a lot more effort, and I really hope that we will find the strength to do so.
Nach einer Kapitulation der Politik an. Sie haben ja quasi gesagt, die Blockade wird sich nicht so schnell auflösen. Frau Orssich, wie geht Ihnen dabei, wenn Sie das
will not dissolve. Can you say what is happening in the council? What kind of feedback you have from the member states? Is there anything more dynamic in it? Thank you very much. Yes, there is a little bit more dynamic because the council, the day after the Commission has accepted the proposal, they started with the discussions, and the Slovenian presidency that is still here until the end of the year made AI a very important priority, and the member states therefore had the opportunity to see the first 29 articles and give their comments, and the big part of the member states made this, but we also have countries like Germany who do not have an opinion, or didn't have an opinion because they were in the elections, but we will have a first compromise text. It doesn't seem that nice, but at least to the first 7 articles where we have definition and application, but also the high risk application. I guess this is already the part which has been the most controversial, where we have something interesting, because that we are taking out research. How about national security and the different definitions? And on Friday, during the Council of the Communication Ministers, we might see this first report, and not all the member states sent us their their results. There will be probably have different approaches, and then this will get together with the work in the Commission. Mrs. Mezini, you said IE, who has IE has the power. And this was also a reflection in Brussels, a geopolitical approach. We see, as far as chips are concerned, how dependent we are, because at a certain point we can have new cars. Who has AI has the power. Power is something I do not like very much, but indeed, you said it with the chips. We have lost a lot also in data analysis, and when we talk about a regulation, we try with this to act so to protect or to regulate data protection. We have the Facebooks and Googles that do not have a European approach, and therefore they have the power on the data of the European citizens. And this is exactly the difficulty or the danger I'm seeing if we are not leading in a technological way, and therefore AI and they do not develop them with the European standard. They give this to others, and we have only the application. This is something where we lose, and the future is digitalized, and AI is a basic part of it, and we can't relax and stay behind. I'm very emotional on that, as you see. These are the data of the European citizens. I hope we will manage this. And it's extremely important that this has to be applied at the right point. And if we are not developing, especially in the digital companies, we have a question from Mr. Mendes from Frankfurt. He is asking if for the European Union, is it already too late? There is too much AI in our normal life in Apple, Google, Tesla, and I don't think that self-regulation is fitting. And who would like to, respond on this? Mr. Kersting, yes, I would like to react. I do not understand it, because the application that we see right now, I do not see where we have the biggest discrimination, and we want that several algorithms that are interfering in our life. But which is the alternative? Now, the first point is we will have even more discrimination, because we can see how difficult it is to change the society. This is a very political process, and these algorithms can help us. And I can say what is difficult, and I can measure it. And I can say, dear researchers, dear company, you did something wrong. And this is very important, because we have to manage this. We know how important it is to have a microscope and to see something you couldn't see before. And therefore, I think it's very, very important. And I would like to allow innovation in like test beds and sandboxes really on a small level, in order to see how this works and how this can be applied. And the second point is, and I think up to now AI saved more lives than it did not, and therefore in Hessen and with colleagues in the whole world, we signed a letter that we don't want weapons with AI. I do not like to have this all AI, all researchers are not ethical and do want to do something bad. That's not the reality. The reality is that these people want to have a better world, and we should also be careful not to go too far. And therefore,
sehr stark da ist.
I think self-regulation is still there. And we need to apply this regulation in all, like in all other sectors. So we should really start in Europe. It's really too bad that we have to talk about AI. It's more than 10 years that where I'm giving a definition of AI, and why should we always continue to discuss with it? Let's start with it. Let's talk about it so that it is innovation friendly, and this would be much more helpful. But when we have fears in the people, yes, we should bring it to the schools. We should talk about it. Former students did things in order to go to the schools and to explain it. What is AI? What is it? Is it bad what I'm doing? Can we live with it? Yes, we can. And this is something we should bring ahead, and it's even more important. We need to explain it. When we had the first chariots in New York, people said that New York will sink because of the horses, and everything would, or everybody would maybe die because he touched an electricity cable. And all this, what we do in the Sabidi and the Hesse, we want to have adapted AI. We want to explain it. We want to show what AI is. It's not really witch work. It's a really hard work sometimes. We were talking about horses and electricity. Now I think about a vaccine, because there are irrational fears. Mr. Koenen, you need some explanation. Do you see yourself to be able to do that? Obviously, explanation can't be only part of the science. It has to be also part of the economy. It's not only B2B, it's also B2C, and this is very sensible, because in this part we have this high security part, and we should work hand in hand. And I would like also to indicate a triangle where every company in Europe will be, because we do have to see this also as far as innovation is concerned. It's not only the AI ruling. This is like a tool. Without this instrument, all this is without sense, and therefore we have the Data Act, and we still not need too much. This is a quite huge package for the companies and for the citizens, and then we have the GDPR, and in this triangle with Data Act and AI, every company has to be involved there. And when we see that we have already 120 pages, then I imagine how this will be. The big companies have big offices with a lot of people. They will complain, but they might have the resources for all this, and I can only hope that with the wave of information where I agree with Mr. Kersting, and we are talking about things where we do not have problems. We are even too far ahead, if I may say so. But what should not happen is that these people who went to the US because we were not able to do it in Europe because, well, AI, it's too difficult, transparency and all the validation. We have training data, and we will be leaving Europe. And then this is, at least for the companies with big resources, if we have places where there are not too many resources, where many are very successful, they will be in this triangle of the regulation. And I can tell you that after what I have heard, normally we do not have a very big AI companies or offices. And what will happen then in the case we will have somebody, oh yes, by the way, in AI I can help you, but you have to be very careful, like with all the others. I have here something which is very expensive and I can train all your people, and the SME person will say, well, that's too difficult, too expensive, too much work, and I might just wait a little bit longer. And this is something that shouldn't happen, because then we will have those companies from outside that are not working under these rules, and then we will have a weak industry where we are not deciding about technology, but where we have late industry and a very dominant, and when we see that the companies from outside are very strong, sometimes we can't go against them, and then many of them have also nice offers, but innovation blocking is something very difficult in this jungle.
Regulieren sein sollte.
So you are regulating what seems hard or impossible to regulate. What would you... I would like to react to that, please. Oh, I did not see that you were available for this, so please, Philip, please first you, then Ms. Minister. We weren't aware that you were still present. Yeah, which is why I was going to take place. So Ms. Orssich, then Ms. Minister. Well, thank you. There are a few points about this I would like to address. Is what being left behind by competition abroad. This is a regulation for any AI on the European market, no matter where it's been created. That's the first important point. The second, if this is limiting innovation for European companies, well, we've tried everything to avoid that impact, especially at the point where if we standardize requirements, implementation will be relatively easy, and the complex element that we know from other regulations is something that we worked on avoiding. Now, of course, there is a risk, and if there is a risk, you have to have regulations, but we've used any tools that were available to us to not become an obstacle to innovation. Now, about the question of too early or too late. Too late, that we really have to look at the big American platforms that are mostly active in B2C. And where you could say, well, we've missed all of that. But in industrial application, we are still leading. We have a very strong industrial basis. We are leading in robotics and other comparable areas. So if we can finish our legal act and we build on the existing potential in Europe, it's not too late. It's exactly on time. And that is also linked to the Data Act. The Data Act is supposed to contribute to that, so that the whole industry can use and utilize the data that are available to us in order to form a basis for all the things we have, all the things we want to do. How can we handle this, and how can we build a good AI and other database applications on this? And from that starting point, I think there are many fields where it's not too late. Is it too early? Well, one more thing about that. There are many companies who asked for regulation in order to have legal certainty so that they know what is possible and what's allowed. So that in order to avoid investing time and money into developing something that might be banned in a few years, or might have to follow different criteria in a few years. And that is, of course, something we have to respect. Thank you very much. Ms. Minister, please. Madam Minister, here. Thank you very much. Well, about AI, good AI, bad AI, that's a difficult phrasing. I do not really like it. The AI is a technical methodology. This is algorithms that I can use in different ways. Analyze something, scaling something, reducing complexity. This is really just a method. And now it's the task of regulators to limit how far such a technical method has to be regulated. To what extent can you do this? How far can you go? If it's risk-based assessment, and that's the idea that's present in the white paper as well, this will not only be evaluating the product or the result, but the procedures. Because AI is an application, is a method, is integrative. So it's even more complicated than you may have thought. And I can not only assess a risk. That's really one important comment about this. We can't talk about good or bad AI. This is a method that you can use for many, many things. So we use AI as an integral momentum, and that's what we have to evaluate. This is very complicated, but it is possible. That was the first point. Second point, I can only have a risk assessment if I have a certain level of practical experience, if I can verify practical application. That's what we want to do in Hessen. These are the sandboxes, the real labs, that what we want to develop here, that we want to set up proper testing. And with this testing hub, this is supposed to be a pilot project. This is planned as a pilot project in Hessen in order to allow also testing and application of other applications as well for other federal states as well. This is where we have to, for other member states as well, because this is where we have to work together. And the third aspect is to think about this on a European level and to think about application and implementation. We need a dialogue about the technology and its applications, because we can only get acceptable results for the citizens if there is a certain level of trust. And trust can only be built if we know what we are supposed to trust in. And I think we really have to all work together, bundle our efforts to make clear what AI is. It's not a flying spaghetti monster, Mr. Kersting, and it's not something that you should reasonably be afraid of. It's just a technical method of optimizing procedures, of creating bigger efficiency. It's a method that allows a huge amount of utility for everyday life. Be it in data management, in mobility, in finance. We're looking into the possibilities of AI application in finance and mobility. So before we regulate too much on a too high level of detail, we really need to look at the applications, at the practical application, because once you have regulated too much, it's very difficult to step back. So regulating in such a way that just offers legal certainty, that respects the risk-based approach, but that allows for innovation. That's the way regulation should be set up, because you have to enable innovation for European possibilities to develop our procedures, our products, our processes, and to bring them to market and develop them. Mr. Voss, I'm going to immediately pass the floor to you. You as a legislator, and you've wanted the floor anyway, so I think this is also about the topic of trust, I assume. Yes. Well, I want to agree to many things previous speakers said. There are some elements where I would say AI, well, stands or falls with the intention behind its development and its application. If you look at offline things, a knife is a good thing, but it can be used as a weapon to attack someone. So the intention behind the development of an AI is very important, has to be taken into account. And what I would say to Ms. Orssich, is that the idea of a risk-based approach makes sense, it's reasonable. But my experience from data protection, where we have the same thing, but where the authorities are simply negating this risk-based approach. Everything is reduced to consent that cannot be taken the same way it was taken in the past. This is really only a fictional consent, because all of us are clicking yes anyway without reading anything. And so this means that it really can't count. So if you are a big tech company or a small or medium enterprise, you cannot be treated on the basis of a risk-based assessment, but everything has to be treated the same way. So be vigilant about this. I would like to really call for vigilance on this topic, that we really stay on a risk-based approach instead of being directed by ideological reasons. And as far as machine data is concerned, there is something where we are looking towards the future, where we say, well, this is great, but there are two elements I want to mention. Well, does China... I get the feeling that China produces a lot more, maybe not as special or particular as what we do, but they're doing a lot. So I don't think having a bit of a head start on machine data is, as our only advantage, is insufficient. They will overcome this, they will catch up to this. And there will be companies who say that I cannot train my AI properly in Europe, so I will have to go to Africa. So I really have to look into this, and this is not against Ms. Orssich, but against politics as a whole, to think about how we can avoid this. And that's the approach I've been missing here, because we see the problems, we perceive the problems, but nobody's doing anything about it. And if I look at Facebook and the way things have developed, and where we should really be proactive as a legislator, if we look at the metaverse, this may only become a reality in 2 or 3 years, but maybe we should already establish guidelines for the picture that is about to be framed here. We won't have all of the details. We won't be able to regulate on a detail level, but we will say, what we can say, we see this development in such a way. And if we get a certain overlap of reality and virtual reality, this will create spaces for organized crime as well, that might use this in a way that's very different from what was intended. And how are we supposed to control all of this? And I think this is something where we really have to be proactive. So if you develop something like this, you have to make sure that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are certain, are clear. And that's something that I'm missing in AI. So in AI, I think we're putting in too much detail right now. For other things, I think it's missing. So it's very important that we keep up to the developments, that we look into these ideas, but we really should consider this more like a guideline in order to leave enough room to breathe and develop. Personally, I think the step of facial recognition, banning facial recognition, of just picking one technology on that, we don't even know what kind of business models might be used with this, I think is not the right approach. I know, Ms. Orssich, none of this is your fault. This is really just politics as a whole that are coming from many different places, of course. But just in general, I think this approach, I would like to see an approach where we do not exclude any technology. And this is something we can see. And if you look at the fight against climate change, for instance, there are other technologies being developed that we may not consider being the right technology. So, which is why we need a certain level of open-mindedness, openness for change on this level. Thank you very much. We are running out of time, and I would like to also go back to Hessen because we have a very interesting question from one of our viewers, Detlef Winkelfoss from the Hessen Center for Data Processing, who would like to know what the basis for any AI is the availability of relevant data. To what extent can you ensure that the data taken up in the state of Hessen are available for everyone so that innovative startups can implement these, can use these data for the creation of profitable applications? Now, this is a question for the minister and also in order to present a little bit what you do with AI, because I think we haven't taken enough time with that question, but we've had so many other fields to tackle that are all very important, and I think you can then just answer this question and then just directly move on without giving back to me to the concluding remarks. Well, this is not a yes or no question that we've just been asked, because this is about the use of data and availability of data. But of course, this is not about personal data that we are making available. I suppose this goes in the direction of how do we handle open data, open source in the long term. And we're currently positioning ourselves. There's a lot of data that we're working with, for example, geodata that are so far along that they can be used, for example, for planning purposes. And as I've already mentioned yesterday, the city of Frankfurt is setting up a digital construction permit, which is using and making available data for use for others. And the topic of startups and AI is, of course, an important element. And like I mentioned, there are 4 core elements to AI work in Hessen that are closely linked to this. We really want to look at what startup companies in particular we are supporting them. We're funding startups, and one of the first projects I could grant there was a startup at the Technical University of Darmstadt, and they want to develop a walking wheelchair. And this is combined with great engineering. There is a robot arm that can move below the wheelchair, that has great AI data usage, that really has an eye in the way to perceive the way for those who have to travel. And this walking wheelchair, in a way, is almost finished as a project and will then integrate engineering, data use, and AI to become very interesting and usable and useful tool for people. So digital transformation at the interface point of AI support is really an important thing, and there's funds of a total of 150 million available for this. Then we also support intercommunal projects like, for example, digital construction permits. There are other 800,000 euros of grants have been given to Fulda, who want to set up, with the help of AI, a water management system that allows them to recognize floods early on. This is another very practical application of AI, and another aspect is the responsibility, innovation, and how we make them work together, which is why we have the Research Center for Responsible Digitization, and we have the Council for Digital Ethics that is working closely with this research center and have taken a strong position on AI. And there are also giving us guidance on how to act on this field. The third important aspect is that we want innovation and research. Research and teaching all have to be promoted. As Mezini and Mr. Kersting have mentioned, with hessian.AI, with the 13 universities, application, research and teaching are core elements. The fourth aspect is a very practical aspect. We want real labs for real situations. We do not only want data centers, which of course we continue to develop, but we also want pilot projects. We want to set up a sandbox that allows examples for applications for startups and SMEs, and to have really baseline of simulations, and that would lead to a type of AI label based on the definitions of responsible use and innovative future planning. And this is what we're working on. These are our criteria for Hessen made AI, and that's what I want to continue, of course, and I hope that we will be able to influence Europe in that direction as well, because I think this should be our shared goal, to have a European AI that is responsible, innovative, future-oriented, in order to make our place, to make our continent of Europe a competitive place that can go its own way, that doesn't have to follow and lag behind the US or China, because we are different and we have to make sure that we are competitive, that we can remain competitive in the future. And this only works if we have a legal framework that allows for legal certainty but isn't over-regulated. Thank you very much. I'll take 3 points from today's discussion. The first point is that in Hessen a lot about AI is happening. The second point is that in Europe we need a development. Regulation on its own is not going to bring us forward. We have to develop things that will, for which there will be a demand in the world as a whole. And if we want to take a leadership role, as I mentioned in my introduction, this has to be done on an industry level by the developers. And the third point that I take is that we have to fight against the spaghetti monster in the heads, if you permit the phrasing. As you've stated, this is really a call for all levels, for very different levels. Anyone who's working with or around the field of AI, and as I've read in the newspaper today, there is already a nice application in Hessen. There's a very simple software, no high tech, that the European Central Bank in Frankfurt is using a software to make a language more accessible for citizens, which just filters out all of the specialized terminology and vocabulary of bankers and translate it into more accessible general German. And I think that is the kind of application that will generate more acceptance for AI, when people can be in contact with it and see that this is nothing bad or evil, this is just something useful that can be present like this. And I would like to thank all of my panelists in Hessen, in Brussels, in Berlin. I would like to thank all of you for your contributions, for a very interesting discussion. And I would like to thank all of you for watching and listening. I would also like to thank our interpreters that have supported us as they usually do. The interpreters, thank you for listening. And I would like to draw your attention to 2 upcoming events. On the 3rd of December, at 1 p.m. we will have an event with the title Meet a Scientist. Of course, we have also had scientists today, as we like to have them here in representation, but particular event, Meet a Scientist. And on the 6th of December, St. Nicholas Day, at 1 p.m. as well, we will have an event, the cohesion of a society experiences in pandemic times. I wish you all a nice afternoon from our overcast Brussels, but it is winter time, so try to be comfortable. Have a nice day.